We are going to start the first night event of the Eurovent Summit with our panel discussion, Vision for the Future of Product Efficiency. Before we start, I would like to thank the sponsor of this night, of this panel discussion, CEIS. So CEIS is a testing and innovation and services center based in Spain with more than 20 years of experience. The panelists of this night are very important and recognized experts. So we have Mr. René Kemna. René is working with a lot of experience, 30 plus years of experience at VHK. VHK is one of the most recognized consultancy group for providing the services for the European Commission, impact assessment studies, eco-design studies, and so on. So thanks a lot, René, for being here. Then we have our, again, very own President of Eurovent Certification, Mr. Sylvain Courtet. Thanks a lot, Sylvain. Federico Munoz from CEIS, 20 more years of experience in testing products within CEIS. He is the Deputy General Director of CEIS and also the CENTIC 113 Chairman. Then Mr. Ozan Emrah Gok from the Ministry of Industry and Technology, and he is the head of the Department of Market Surveillance of Industrial Products. Thanks, Ozan. And last but for sure not least, Marco Duran. Marco is working from UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, and is in his role, he's involved in the development of global tools for modern regulations guidelines. Thanks, Marco. So let's start. So state of the play. I'm going to sit. So state of the play. Now, really would like to start by assessing which is the state of the play at the European level, at the Turkish level, and at the global level. So let's start from René. Well, so René, you prepared the eco-design impact accounting, so you know which are the results of the eco-design measures already in place. Please, can you elaborate on it, which are the benefits, the savings for the European Union? Yep.
Okay, thank you, Francesco. Eco-design impact accounting is something that our consultancy is doing for the Commission since 2013. We look at all the existing review studies and measures which are around and all the underlying data, and we collect them and we recalculate them in one specific methodology. From that, you will see the saving figures which are projected already in the ongoing regulations. So not the new ones and not the ones on the way. So it's pretty sure that this is the consensus of all stakeholders of what's going to happen. If you look at how much we are covering now 55% of all energy use with eco-design regulations and energy label regulations. So from that, we are saving something like 10% in 2020 and even 18%, and that's the graph that you see here, in 2030. Now, if you look at your sector, we are looking mainly at the red part here and the blue part here. Then we are talking about 40% of the total of savings coming from your sector. So HVAC and R. So without doubt, it's the most important sector from the point of view of energy saving. And this is without the Repower EU or any other projections that are around. This is stuff, for instance, for the boilers from 2013. So these are fairly fixed figures. We expect them to increase a lot. We expect especially the monetary savings from this to increase a lot, because at the moment we are saving here with these savings something like 60 billion euros per year. That is with energy prices of 2020. If you looked at energy prices now, you are probably looking at a factor 3 higher. If you look at the plans for 2030, which are not in here, which were not in 2020, we're going even far beyond that. Okay, well, those are projections.
Well, René, thanks a lot. So it means that our industry plays a very important role in this saving. So that's very important. So the product efficiency, the efficiency of our products, playing a very important role and moves forward the energy saving and the ambitions of the European Union. So thanks a lot for this assessment.
Okay.
And Ozan, from your point of view, so which is the status of the eco-design regulations, the transposition in Turkey of the eco-design regulations? And did you also assess the related saving as has been done here?
Okay, thank you, Francesco, for your introduction. I can actually say that there is no difference level between EU level and Turkey. Since the Customs Union Agreement came into force in 1995, the transposition, the harmonization and implementation of the technical regulations, technical directives are also being implemented in our ministry and in our country. So basically I can say that the transposition, we are also at the same level in the EU and Turkey. According to the international agency studies, I can approximately talk about the saving about differs from 10 to 25% in our country.
Okay, thanks a lot. Very, very clear. So the status of the transposition is there. Yeah, okay. And Marco, now from your global perspective, you have assessed this. Looks like there is a deployment of the eco-design regulations globally. Which is your assessment in terms of saving and transposition as well?
Yes, thank you, Francesco, and hello, everyone. So the initiative that I represent in the United Nations Environment Program works with 156 developing countries and emerging economies. And this assessment that you see here in the gray line, that is the expected electricity consumption and the growth, which is very significant from 2021, 2020, all the way to 2024, growing about 68%. For domestic refrigeration, commercial refrigeration, and room air conditioners or light commercial air conditioners. This demand, of course, responds to the growing population. The products are becoming more affordable in many of the economies, but at the same time that the weather is getting warmer, and if you will, more people are perceiving more cooling degree days, therefore they're purchasing or they're demanding more equipment. In the initiative, we provide tailored support to many of these countries in order to set up the regulations, to set up minimum energy performance standards, and to also build programs to pull energy efficient equipment into their markets. And the projections that you see here in the blue line are the projections from these countries adopting a minimum energy performance standards that are more or less or following the European levels of efficiency, and also the latest Chinese efficiency for air conditioners and so on. More details I can provide after, but global trends, following global trends and best practices. And then the minimum energy efficiency scenario, which is the blue line, is 650 terawatt hours, which is more or less the electricity production of France, a bit more. And then if we go for higher ambition, which means higher efficiency or like targeting not only the minimum energy performance standards, but also like pulling like more efficient products, the unlocking potential is higher. Both combined, the green and the blue, is more or less the energy production of India, which is pretty significant.
Okay, Marco, so thanks a lot. So this assessment is quite important also because you mentioned that it's based on an approach following almost the European regulations. So at a global level, there is an approach following the European regulations. You mentioned also the Chinese is one for air conditioners, but okay. Now let's move on to, okay, we have assessed the state of the play in Europe, in Turkey, and at global level. Now let's go to something different, compliance and market surveillance, which for sure plays a very important role for our industry. So first question or consideration is for René. Here on the screen you have assessed which might be the primary energy saving, having all the products properly complying, and which might be the primary energy saving with non-compliance, which is a big difference because the energy saving is around minus 10%. So can you elaborate on it, please?
Well, the point is that the actual compliance is really difficult to measure, and the projections usually do not take it into account. But there has been a huge, let's say, audit by the European Court of Auditors 2 years ago, which said, okay, we cannot accept that there is 100% compliance. We want to have an estimate of the real compliance. So we looked at that. We looked at various sectors where there are very scarce data available, and we came to an estimate of 10%. Now, if that is 100% correct, we don't know. We made the best guess possible because the tragedy of non-compliance is that it's usually very well hidden. Otherwise, there would be fines, the people would be punished, etc. So this is, I think, as realistic as we can make the assignment.
But René, from your perspective, what can be done for improving this non-compliance?
Well, you know, with eco-design, it's not with the European Commission, it's with the member states to do this. So it is important to have all the checks possible to see whether a product is compliant or not. And there are various ways to check, usually quite expensive ways to check, to retest, maybe do the paper research, but that's not really the big point. The big point is, does it really do what it says it does? And in that case, we think that there are various ways that you could verify this. There is auto-policing of the industry, there is supervision, but certainly also, I think, all the checks that you can get.
Okay, René, thanks a lot. So, various ways for verifying the non-compliance. Sylvain, from your point of view, third-party voluntary certification can play a role if we also refer to the European regulation on market surveillance, where there is the possibility to make use of the support of other authorities in market surveillance. Would third-party certification play a role? And in case, would third-party certification also play a role for accessing financial incentives?
Yeah, okay. Maybe first I can explain how I see the difference between compliance with regulation on one side and voluntary certification, which is our main activity within Eurovent certification. So regulation is there to set requirements in order to be able to sell products on the European markets. If you cannot comply, you cannot sell. That's the point. And as you said, there are different ways to control that. Self-declaration, market surveillance, sometimes notified bodies. There are many ways to do that. What we are doing is to create, let's say, a sub system of manufacturers and products that voluntarily get under very strict controls on a regular basis with audits, with selection software verification, with test in independent laboratories. And this group of manufacturers and products, they decide on a voluntary basis to go under all these very strict process and controls in order to show to their customers that they are open and they are compliant with what they are saying. So we are creating a group of manufacturers which want to show to their customers how good they are and how transparent they are. So it's a marketing tool for the manufacturers, but let's say it's a very smart marketing activities because you show how good you comply to your customers. So voluntary certification is not there for compliance verification, but as we are doing many tests, we are managing more than 1,600 tests every year.
Only.
We have very smart selection sampling tools. And we perform more than 400 audits in manufacturing places in Europe, but outside Europe also. So we're not only checking what is manufactured in Europe, but also what is manufactured outside Europe for products that are intended for the European market.
Your certification applies to Europe as well as outside. It's a global certification.
Indeed. Of course, we are coming from Europe, but more and more our participants are also exporting to Middle East and Asia and also are promoting our activities. So as we are doing all these checks, all these verifications, it seems to me very evident that market surveillance authorities can make a use of it. It's there, it's available, it's done. So you have a group that has been controlled by an external body. So market surveillance authorities should focus all their effort, all the money they have on manufacturers that do not go under this process.
So your certification pulls the market toward more efficient products, and the market surveillance authorities can make use of your certification for being sure which are the products complying or not complying.
Yes, it's very complementary. Regulation makes sure that all products complies, so that the less efficient products are above the line. We are covering all the markets. So we pull all the market towards better energy efficiency, and regulation is there to push the market.
Okay, but Ozan, from your point of view, the possibility of a cooperation between the market surveillance authorities and a voluntary third-party certification like Eurovent certification, is this something that might be considered, something that would play a role indeed in pulling the market towards more efficient products?
If it will contribute the increase of level of the conformity level of the products in the sector, why not? The point is we are looking for is market surveillance activity is not solely based on how many non-conformity products were removed from the marketplace, but on how many non-conforming products were kept from being produced in the first place. That's why a tool can be used in this approach. We can also consider these certifications relevant to the regulations and directives. Also, it can be also usable. Also, there is a little maybe impartiality. There can be a little the necessary point. There can be the impartiality of these certifications. If there is not a problem about this impartiality, then everything will be okay by our side.
Okay, so as far as the impartiality is met and all the requirements are there, it's something that from your perspective could work properly.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I just wanted to stress what I said before. If we're talking about 10% of the 1700 terawatt hour, we're talking about 170 terawatt hours, which goes down the drain if the compliance is not correct. So that is a really big issue. The second big issue is that, as I said before, 40% is heating and cooling. But when we're talking about heat pump subsidies, support, incentives, etc. We're no longer talking about 100 euros for an A fridge or whatever. We are talking about 3,000 euros, 4,000 euros support for one heat pump. Now, if that is going wrong, it's really taxpayers' money thrown away. So I think anything should help, and I think this is a very good example of how that can be done.
Well, very good. So also from the incentive schemes point of view, by having a well-performing product certified by a third-party voluntary scheme, this could pay off in terms of financial incentives that are properly paid and in terms of, for sure, efficient product. Okay. Federico, from your point of view, at CEIS you test a lot of products every year. Did you, I think it's working. Did you see major differences between certified products and non-certified products? And if any, which are?
Thank you for the question. As you said, we test many products in our laboratory. Some of them are coming from certification processes. Other are because of the purposes of prototyping, market surveillance, private testing by the companies. I would say that, of course, nothing is perfect, but the level of compliance when we are talking about certified products is quite high. And I'm sure that Sylvain could give more precise figures, but I would say that the number of failures when we are talking about products which are certified is not significant. It's not the same when we are talking about market surveillance, especially when the authorities are paying attention to those products which are not previously certified. And I think that mentioning the point we have discussed before, it's important that the European authorities, the member states, I would say, because responsibility is on the member states, pay attention on products which have been known, let's say, validated by a third party before, because the level of compliance is, I would say, significantly different to the others.
So, all in all, based on your experience, certified products, very likely they perform properly. Non-certified products might perform properly, but not always. And in this case, the market surveillance should focus on non-certified.
Yes, that would be the summary. Certified products are compliant in general. Market surveillance authorities should pay attention to the non-certified products. We are playing or which are trying to compete in the same playground with different levels of compliance.
Okay. Your assessment is very, very clear. But Ozan, from your point of view here, market surveillance in Turkey, what is market surveillance here? Are you performing tests? Are you going through paper check and test? How is doing it?
Yes, okay. Being a market surveillance authority makes us to choose a role about being a good cop or bad cop. In some scenarios, we follow the being a good cop about paper check and verification of the calculations and validating and them. But in some scenarios, we have to take some samples, then the verification of the sample, and after the tests, we elaborate them, and it differs from sector to sector and product to product. But in general, we try to first to minimize the costs of the activities. Firstly, we try to verification of the calculations, paper-based checks. If we have the ability to test all the products, then we take samples if any non-compliance is any concern about non-compliance. Then in some sectors, we have the test laboratories about products, but in some way, we try to collaborate with our European colleagues, but about sharing the same project like e-plan projects. We take part in this project actively since years, and we try to, when we don't have any laboratory in some products, we try to use the other products in other countries and try to do the best activity about this sector.
So it's all in all, it's a kind of a joint effort. What you do locally and what is done also by the other colleagues in Europe.
Yes, we try to do this in two ways. I can say that yes, briefly.
Marco, from your, again, global perspective, market surveillance, does it exist? What does it mean?
Yes, no. Market surveillance is present in many countries, from the ones we were talking before, emerging economies and developing countries. But the reality is that, like, in many of the countries, there's no laboratory, and the reality is also that in many countries they're so small that a laboratory doesn't even make sense. And I've seen, for example, I don't know, in Costa Rica, my home country, there's a laboratory that tests some equipment, and like they do market surveillance, and it's working pretty much okay. But for example, recently we got a request from the Dominican Republic. They don't have a laboratory, and then the officials were saying, we know that there's a lot of equipment entering our markets that is labeled with any label, but like the labeling is not yet in place, and they're claiming an energy efficiency that the equipment is not really delivering, and there's no way, we don't have a way to like either do a spot check or like to test, because the capacity is not here. So the request was to help them to a feasibility assessment to establish a laboratory. But speaking about the Dominican Republic, and just a brief example, in the Caribbean region, non-Hispanic or non-Spanish speaking countries, but the rest of the Caribbean, they are doing an interesting model, which is, for example, Jamaica has a testing laboratory that works for air conditioners and for refrigerators, domestic. And then Trinidad and Tobago has one for lighting. So they're doing agreements so that, for example, Trinidad and Tobago will serve as the laboratory for the rest of the countries in the region, which includes islands that have 120,000 people, and that's a nation. And then the Dominican Republic, Jamaica will be the other laboratory for domestic refrigeration and for air conditioning. And with that, they can not only like send their equipment to be tested there, or the suppliers go and test it there, but also if one of the islands detects a non-compliant equipment for some reason, that the label is not working or something, they can alert as well. And then the checks can be done in order for them to be more compliant as a block, which is something really important, especially for economies that will not develop their own laboratory, because it doesn't not only make sense, but also it's a smarter way of operating.
So kind of a cooperation, fertilization between different countries, in this case for the Caribbean areas and so on, is paying off.
Yes, I think the cooperation is important, and also learning from the European example as well. I think it's the example here, and I think it's very important in terms of policy harmonization and cooperation.
But now, as we are talking about the future vision for product efficiency, René, you know that, for sure, you know, something is going on how to assess the performance of product in a dynamic way, the so-called compensation method, which is something that it's ongoing, defined, not defined, round-robin test, and so on. Let's consider that it is at its final stage, the compensation method. Would the market surveillance authorities be ready for testing products according to this method? Or would the market surveillance authorities benefit from the support of third-party voluntary certification or whatever?
Well, there are, of course, several. So, I mean, our job is we assist the Commission in a process which might take 4 years, 5 years, and when it's finished, it's the start for the stakeholders to do whatever has been decided.
On the duration of the process, we can discuss.
Yeah, but I get there. So what we normally do, when there are very new subjects in that long process, we are listening to the stakeholders. We know that there are problems with the compensation method and so forth. So in that case, what the Commission usually decides is also not to do it in a hurry and to give the right timing to solve the problems, to make the decisions, to involve the standardization process, to involve a round-robin test, as you mentioned. So that is, in that long process, something that we are doing. And I think for the problems that you mentioned, that's also the way forward that we're going to do. Not in a hurry, but really, let's say, make sure that we are doing the right thing and that we're not overreaching the objectives.
But as soon as, indeed, you reach the objective, so the method is reliable, repeatable, and so on, then it goes to the national states, the member states, and the market surveillance authorities. Would be really ready to catch it, or the support of the voluntary certification could play a role?
It's a little bit like the previous discussion. You know, we have a tolerance, an uncertainty of 10% maybe, or 15%, because we are seeing that people are not using the right test method. It is not close enough to real life. It does not give the right order. So the best product is not one, but it's only at the end of the line. So all these problems you try to avoid, because again, if you're talking about people's money, you're talking about taxpayers' money, and you want to do the right thing. So that's why we're not proposing to do things in a hurry to the Commission, and the Commission usually follows that.
Okay, so not proposing anything on hurry, the Commission follows it, but we are still talking about a testing method.
Yeah, well, as I said, the standardization process is the right way forward for anything which is new. And I think also in terms of timing, the Commission tries to follow the standard timing of a standardization process, giving it enough time to make the really right decision. And also on the subject that you mentioned, like the compensation method, like a third-party certification. Third-party certification is also something which takes away some uncertainty with the member states. At the moment, we see that in many countries, people have their own national test method because they don't trust obviously they don't trust what the eco-design standards prescribe. So why is that? How can we do something about it? Because Europe is supposed to be a single market. We are not every country for themselves with their own test methods. So the proposal for third-party certification did not come from the Commission in first instance. It came also from the industrial stakeholders who had this problem, like, okay, we have to certify in Belgium, in Holland, in France, in Italy, all in their own way. So we try to work on it. Commission tries to work on it, but in a responsible way. And there's always a good argumentation for these things.
Okay, so we are talking about a testing method which is under finalization, but needs to be backed up, to be supported by the standardization. So in this case, I would like to ask Federico, based on his experience as a laboratory testing a lot of units per year, but also as a CENTIC 113 convener. First of all, why standards are needed? Which is the benefit of testing products according to a standard? Which standard usually means lab conditions, not real life conditions?
Good question. I would say that standard is a way to do something in a way. So we are talking about repeatability, for example. We are talking about processes under control. So, I would say at European level, we have the obligation to have good standards because it's the way to demonstrate to the world what is the level of the products we want to put in the markets. So as Europe wanted to have this role of leader in the world, we need to develop strong standards for our products. On the other hand, we have a mandate from the Commission to the different European standardization committees adapting the standards to the regulations. So this is an important role of the standards. It's a way to demonstrate that the products are complying with the different regulations. And at the end of the day, we need to create a fair playground, play field for the different parties, for the different actors, which wanted to put products in the market. So I need the need of robust standards is because the combination of these different points. Of course, when we are talking about the industry, it's quite important that our committee, the TC113, was able to adapt the methods to the reality of the products which are installed in residential or commercial places.
Okay, so standards, they play all in all a double role, ensuring the level play field. But if you would like to get back to what has been done by René in accounting the energy saving, real life conditions results in something more accurate than lab conditions.
Yeah, of course. We have been participating in this round robin test promoted by BAM in order to analyze the compensation method or to put in practice. Well, of course, we need to, let's say that the actual standards are, well, laboratory conditions, well, with some combinations of temperatures, humidities, whatever. And well, I think there is an interesting and important work to be done in order to incorporate real conditions to the testing conditions. That will be more accurate. I agree with René that it will be not so easy, or we need further works before to standardize. I would say that the 14A25, let's say, considering seasonal conditions, is a robust standard, but of course it's our mandate as committee to think about the possibility to work on new standards contemplating more realistic conditions.
While you are mentioning 1485, it looks like there is another standard a bit similar but different at the same time, the 14511, which applies almost to the same products, but the testing conditions are different, final results are different, and there is a lack of maybe of clarity which of the two are to be used.
Well, maybe it's because of the history. I would say for decades, we have been using 14511 Part 2 to comply with the regulations. Since 2012, I think, well, in 2012, it was the first edition of 14825, so including seasonal conditions. And we are still using 14511 Part 3 as the testing methods. So we have to distinguish between the testing conditions and the testing methods. Part 2 of the 511 is related to the conditions to comply with the previous regulation, but now the regulation or the mandate says you have to develop a new standard, which is 14825. So from my point of view, is no doubt we are all obliged to comply with 14825. We should disseminate, and we have to work on spreading this information to the market to avoid misunderstandings.
Federico, thanks a lot for this clarification, which I think is quite important. And now, Marco, getting back to the global level and the development, the rollout of a new minimum energy performance standards left and right in the world, which is the role played by the standards. European standards, ISO standards.
Okay. Thank you, Francesco. And I think, well, this map, we're missing the symbology there, but the map shows the green countries who are the ones that have MEPs, and then the blue ones, which are in development, and the orange ones, which are voluntary energy levels. It looks very good. It looks like we're actually succeeding, and we're actually like getting there. But it is very difficult to also understand or to also quantify like what MEPs are actually updated. Many of these MEPs are actually very outdated. So like they're not really doing anything to the market. Most of the equipment that is already in the market is already way above that. So it's not cleaning or building a level like playing field. And also if we think about like what the consumer does, the consumer also, if there's not enough consumer information, they will not choose energy efficiency. Energy efficiency needs to be assured for them, and the energy labels are consumer information as it happens in Europe that started using them in '95, which is some time ago, but still like recent, but like many other countries don't have it. And they will like go for the primary cost of the equipment, and they will not take into account the electricity bill, their lifetime costs, and so on. So having energy labels, having MEPs, it's very important, but the ones that are updated. We have, in the United for Efficiency, developed a tool called the Model Regulation Guidelines. This tool is to assist countries to set up their regulation, their MEPs, their conformity assessment, testing, and not to start from scratch, and also not doing it from a very, let's say, a local perspective, but also to take into account global trends and global testing standards and standards in general. We're leveraging ISO, IEC for domestic refrigeration, for air conditioning as well, for commercial refrigeration. And for example, for refrigerators, we're aligning with the EU 2021 level because we cannot ask countries to align with the EU 2024 yet because they are following or they're setting up maybe their first levels. And then for air conditioners, what we did was leveraging these standards as well. But as we're talking about all the climate zones, we're also using ASHRAE climate zones in order to suggest the testing conditions that they should use for actually having results that are comparable, well, not necessarily comparable, but are actually like fit to their market, and that they will show the actual performance. Because what happens right now is that they get labels and they get certifications from different places that are really difficult to grasp because they're not for the conditions of the country. So I think it's very important to follow this example and to like hopefully like apply the concept of policy harmonization. Again, where like smaller countries can help with blocks of bigger countries and bigger economies to pull energy efficient equipment into their markets by aligning their policies with other markets. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the path to follow, aligning with international standards in order to roll out this minimum energy performance standards based on the same testing methods and so on. Okay.
Yes, at least for them to benchmark against those levels.
Okay. And now let's move to the last section of this panel, circularity. And a question for René. Circularity is the new frontier, it goes without saying. But if we look at reparability, durability, and so on, and we compare it with the average lifetime of a product, what does play a role? What's more important?
Well, I think so far, eco-design is about energy using or energy related products. So, and most of these products, not all, vacuum cleaners, smartphones, etc., but most of these products, the energy use is such an overriding argument that it completely dwarfs, it makes it small, what is happening on the material side. Now, of course, if you are talking about products which are not energy using, things might be different. And if you're talking about a smartphone, the production of the smartphone is much more important for the environment than the energy use of smartphone. So there are some exceptions, but in general, and especially in the sector of heating and cooling, let's say the material aspect is not that important. If you have a longer life even, it could block the innovation for new energy efficient products. So in that case, it's really counterproductive. But let's be clear, huh? If you can do circularity, you should. Also with energy using products, but often you cannot.
So very clear. For some product plays an important role. For some other product, maybe it's better to have efficient products. Okay, okay. And Marco, you told me that also in terms of circularity, the second-hand market plays an important role. So what do you mean for that?
So yes, I think this is even a bit controversial, which is really interesting, and I following up on what René just said. But many of the developing and emerging economies are actually not manufacturers. Of course, they're receiving economies. They're receiving equipment that is imported to the markets, and in many cases, they're receiving inefficient equipment that is not compliant in other markets, which is, of course, a problematic, because they will be purchasing a 10 or 15 year problem because it's going to be using a lot of electricity in those years, especially if they don't have regulations. But at the same time, there's also a second-hand market, which is really, it's not only an environmental issue, but it's also an economic issue as well, because they're receiving lots of equipment that are used in these markets, and there's no regulation for that. There's regulation for e-waste. The Basel Convention regulates e-waste. But if an equipment is near to its end of life or is still operational, it cannot be declared as waste. So it can still be exported to these countries. And from a study that the UN did from 2008 to 2013, the trade value of used products, or used refrigerators actually that were exported to Africa, the trade value per kilogram was around $1 per kilo. What does that tell you? Is it actually something that somebody will purchase, or it has actually any value, or is just a cover for recycling schemes that actually are not recycling anything? And we see landfills in Nigeria, we see landfills in Ghana. I was in Nigeria recently. We have a project with them to help ramp up their MEPs and so on. On the streets, sometimes I saw old refrigerators just there. It's not even a landfill, and it's an environmental problem. What can be done? Of course, for this, there's the need of information. There's the need of setting bans, import bans and export bans. A country sets an import ban from let's say in Africa, and then the corresponding export country sets an export ban for products that are around this category, which is important, but also it makes us rethink what happens with the durability of the products, as René was saying. What if we make a product that will last 20 years, but the efficiency will not be good in the next 12 years, for example? Those extra years we're maybe losing in design, instead of trying to improve recyclability, so that we can dismantle the equipment easily and also apply, for example, extended producer responsibility in Europe to actually capture that equipment before it goes abroad and creates another problem. And we also need training, which is also very important for the dismantling here and there. That's what manufacturers can do. So it's really something that we need to work on in terms of circularity in Europe.
Now, Marco, thanks. Very important this point on import and export ban in order to improve or increase the energy efficiency instead of placing on the market not efficient product. That's very important point. But we are perfectly on time, so we can ask an additional question to René as new frontier and circularity. Eco-design methodology for energy-related product versus ESPR, the new frontier.
That's a difficult question. I mean, I come from the energy efficiency side, and but as I said, I mean, I'm very curious to see what is going to happen with the ESPR, with the textiles, the furniture, maybe building components which are not energy related. I'm curious to see how it's going to work and if it's going to work out, because Marco was saying this is a big risk. There's so many ways you could misuse a certain, let's say, in principle correct notion, like, okay, we prolong the life, which in the end just comes back to you. And you could say, okay, we are just prolonging the life because we're saving energy. So it's not a simple answer to your question, but I think it is an interesting experiment, ESPR. But I also think that for energy using products, which are talking about energy related products, you have to be very careful not to exaggerate. And I think what we are trying to do also with the accounting, we are also trying to expand that to material resources accounting in order to give the policymakers the right impression of, okay, where should the priorities be for this product? And not just have one approach fits all, but have a very specific approach for each product. What is more important, the materials, the energy, and have the right balance there. I think that would be the way that I would see it. Okay.
Thanks a lot, René, because this point is very, very important. For energy-related products, we should try to avoid to exaggerate. The methodology in place is working properly. Why should we look for something that might exaggerate indeed? Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. So now I would like to open to the audience. If there are any questions, there are a couple of hand micros, so raise your hand and feel free to ask whatever our experts can answer. As far as I know, this is a business model already in place for certain products, but those products that can be easily movable. If you are referring to supermarket equipment, we are talking about big products. The dimension is quite important. The smaller cabinet in a supermarket is 3.75 meters. Cannot be rent and moved like that. It's remote connected to a cooling packs and so on. So for products that are movable, I know that this business is already in place. For big products that cannot be moved easily, it is not in place. And in my opinion, I think it's not easy to have it in place. But also let's ask the other.
Well, it's about with utility companies, they are a sort of energy service company. So they rent out, if you like, boilers. They install the boiler, they change the boiler, and they are the owner of the boiler. And so for these products, something similar exists. But don't ask me what they do with the boilers that they take away from one house, and I don't know. I really don't know. So, but it exists. The business model exists. And of course, the Commission is always trying to make it in their favor. So also the heat pumps, which is for somebody who has a small pension, is a really big buy. I mean, the really big investment. And in those cases, they say, why don't the utility companies do that for the people and then rent it out? Okay. And some utilities companies really do that, but some don't. So I am not sure what happens when the not so efficient heat pump should be taken back and a more efficient is going there. Is this old heat pump, where is it going? I don't know. So there's some questions marked here, but the business model, as Francesco says, is there, but not universal.
Okay. Other questions? It's there because what we were discussing before, the ESPR is the Energy Sustainable Product Regulation, which is supposed to replace indeed eco-design. So it's already there. The Commission is heading toward this point, but as René mentioned, we should try to avoid over-regulating. It's getting difficult. But the approach of moving from ERP to circularity, also from the wording, the naming, it's there. It's already in place. It's going to arrive.
It's hidden.
Sorry?
It's hidden.
It's going to arrive. No, it's going to arrive. It's going to arrive.
I think it's a live products. Well, that could be a catchy name. I mean, we could propose it to the Commission. Live products. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Okay. Other question? Yeah, but also right now, market surveillance is up to the member states, but the Commission put in place a lot of finance project, e-client, INTAS, and so on, e-client 1, 2, and 3, aiming at least in understanding the state of the art, market surveillance, and many countries, Italy, made use of e-client and INTAS for testing their products for the market surveillance purposes. But it's up to the member states.
It's a matter of subsidiarity, which means that whatever the member states can do, they should do. And only if the EU at that level can do better, then the EU can do. So it's the member states who decide that they want to do the market surveillance because they can do it. That's the principle. So it's not up to the Commission to decide that that they should do it, that the EU should do it. If the EU gets the budget to do it, they will do it. But the subsidiarity principle forbids that. So your target should be the member state. Each member state should say, okay, you should do more about market surveillance, or give the Commission the, let's say, the assignment to do it. It's not the Commission who can decide on its own. That's how the legislation works at the moment. But you are the first one. I mean, most people have a criticism that the Commission is doing too much. So, yeah.
Okay, so we are at the end of this panel discussion. I think that was... Oh, Luca, last question, okay.
Well, I think that the CE marking has many problems, but one of the problems I think it has is that the first approach to the CE marking was based on product safety, and it's a very old approach to the reality. Let's say when you are talking about construction products, there are 4 ways to declare the conformity of the product, from level 1, let's say the scheme 1 to 4. So from self-declaration to the intervention of notified bodies with surveillance, something similar to a voluntary certification scheme. So maybe as the market surveillance is one, I would say the key point to control the market, one different approach would be to avoid self-declaration and to change or to give more importance to the energy. Let's say, as in the past, you cannot see any piece of steel in Europe with a level 1 related to the construction product regulations. And I would say that the most important certification scheme, private or let's say voluntary certification schemes, are related to those products which the highest levels of importance from the point of view of the safety and security. If the Commission has a different approach, avoiding self-declaration and changing the rules and promoting that other institutions will be involved in the process to avoid self-declaration, I think that could be a solution, because at the end of the day, the market surveillance is permitting some products entering into the market without covering other regulations. That's my approach.
Okay, so thanks a lot We are exactly following the timing, a couple of minutes over. So thanks a lot. Thanks Sylvain. Thanks René. Thanks Ozan. Thanks Marco. Thanks Federico. And let's continue enjoying this first event night. Thank you.